Hi everyone. We are just waiting 2 to 3 minutes before we get started, so to allow others to attend and connect. And we will be back in 2 minutes. Okay, welcome everyone. So I'm Heike Ritter and I will be your host for this webinar. Thanks everyone for joining and thanks for being part of our community. A few reminders before we start. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. The recording will be posted on our community at aka.ms/security webinars. During the webinar, please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on Ask a Question button. Questions you post will be made publicly available, and if you prefer, you can post your questions anonymously by checking the box right below where you entered. We often get many questions during these kind of webinars, and we are doing our best to respond to all of them in real time. If the answer was not provided or if you have additional questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to ask them on our Microsoft Defender ATP forum at aka.ms/mdatptc. If you are listening to this after the fact as a recording, you can also use this place to ask questions at any time. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars, so please do so at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. And this is really important for us because we want to deliver the content you need, so let us know. If you haven't already, please join our community, same link, aka.ms/security community.